Here's a challenge many creatives, including myself, experience in the process of giving birth to a new pattern, a new dynamic, a new creation, giving birth to a new pattern of energy. The problem comes, first of all, in the relationship of scale. When any new thing is truly original, it is occupying a minority position. You know, when Edison finally completed his 10,000th experiment and had the best light bulb in the world, there was only one in that moment, and only one person who knew how to do it and do it again. And therein comes the fragility. There's a fragility in the relationship between the one and the many. Now, complicating this dynamic further is when the creation is in a cultural or cult domain. Now, a culture, for better or worse, harms and benefits a variety of people in different situations. But one of the ways that a culture helps everyone is by stabilizing and pushing away chaos by protecting the status quo. Now, this is a complicated enterprise because the status quo, by definition, is always mediocre. It's not the most intelligent way to go about things. You cannot pick a single area in any status quo anywhere and say, yep, that's the most intelligent diet. If you were designing a diet from scratch today based on the best data, gee, everyone would eat French fries, hamburgers, and soda. And then a few generations later, they could all get fat, like a large percentage of Americans today, on starch and highly processed dairies and sugar, without the balance in fresh vegetables and protein. And you have a status quo. So the reason that the status quo is so important is not because it's excellent. The status quo is deeply and fundamentally flawed in its relationship with intelligence. It's not hard to design an education system, a prison system, a legal system, a political system, a work system, an ecological system that is 10 times better than the status quo in America and many Western cults today. That's easy. But that's not really the purpose of the cult. The cult mind and the cult machine that works tirelessly 24/7 to create and maintain norms is not doing so because those norms are intelligent. It's doing so because they are necessary to accommodate the limited bandwidth of the brains that are in those cults. You literally cannot function if from the moment you get out of bed, you consider, should I get out of bed or not? Is suicide better for the planet, given our large consumption of energy per capita, including 100 tons of waste thrown in a landfill per person? Is that a good idea? Should I use garbage cans, given all the waste in the landfills? Should I walk, or should I resign? given, the peak of global warming, and just protest. I don't have money to pay rent, but there are more important things because global warming dictates we need a change, and we can't have people going to work in this state when the whole species may go up in smoke in the next 100 years. And so landlords, back off. I'm doing something more important than going to work. How about that? Maybe that's a good idea. And what about food? Then there's the diet that, does this and the diet that does that. And so-and-so doesn't eat, Jack Dorsey eats one meal a day, I think, in the evening. But other people say, eating snacks 3 to 5 times a day so your blood sugar doesn't go down. That's the way to do it. Well, we have to research that, before we have a bite to eat, since we don't want that to be, start the day off wrong. And you can see the problem with chaos. So any artist in a cultural domain is going to create chaos by creating diversity, complexity, intelligence, and with it, change. You cannot have intelligence without change. So if your goal is to maintain a status quo, a rhythm, that whether good or bad is predictable, then you've got to kill off intelligence. Now, why can't the brain get out of bed and process the entire cult algorithm in 5 or 6 seconds, and then proceed much more intelligently than the day before? Because we don't have the RAM. We don't have the processing power. The human brain can do a good job of thinking about, iterating, and improving at most 5% of reality. It's, in broader senses, maybe 20%. In more focused, narrow sense, maybe 1%, but it's not the majority. You cannot reevaluate the majority of your identity at a personal level and still function, because it's too overwhelming to get out of bed and go through all of those philosophical debates in the process, get out to your car, only to discover that your neighbor has decided to drive on the other side of the road as a philosophical statement against being a sheep. And so, you took your sip of coffee at the time where you knew you had 200 meters before the stop sign, and you knew that there weren't any pedestrians there. So that was the time to lower your guard, focus on the coffee. But by the time you put it down, there's a car on the other side of the road that you couldn't anticipate because they violated the status quo. Now, that's the problem that a cult is trying to solve. It's not that driving on this side or that side is more intelligent. It's not that driving gas-guzzling cars is better than electric. It's not that roads are better than jetpacks. It's simply that that's the way that has been established within the politics of the time. And having been established as the way, it has to be maintained by a majority so that a majority knows what to expect, so that a majority can turn their attention away from most of what's going on to focus on a few things that need conscious creative attention. Now, that entire machine turns itself and guns down any creative, any artist that has a more intelligent way, that brings life, that brings uniqueness, that brings vitality, that challenges the system. Now, the system has a large arsenal of technology at its disposal to kill off uniqueness, to kill off intelligence. First, we'll ignore it. Second, we'll discourage thinking. Third, we'll make route learning and copying the teacher mandatory, and we're going to try and kill off as much creativity and uniqueness as possible by bullying it and teasing it in the playgrounds, et cetera, et cetera. There's denial, there's ostracization. That person is deviating from the norm. Let's all collude to avoid them. It's a pretty effective technique. After everyone avoids you for a few weeks because you, dyed your hair blue, decided to put red on half of your face, something that doesn't fit into the norm. It may even be highly intelligent. You've decided to become carbon neutral by planting 1,000 trees on the mountainside. But nobody else is planting 1,000 trees on the mountainside. My wife became a little bit suspect when she started reading a book in Manila, because in her kind of neck of the woods, people weren't reading books. They were watching and playing video games on their phone. So something's a little bit suspect. And teenagers and peers gang in to tease, to humiliate, to challenge, to focus unwanted attention on the person who is eating a different lunch. My mother thought that homemade bread was the way to go. And so she made thick sandwiches with homemade bread. And objectively speaking, if one looks at the data, whole grains better for the body than processed grains. But this wasn't the point. The point was, here was this one person who had a different lunch. There weren't potato chips and cookies and this and that and, bits of white pre-sliced bread. This was a deviation from the norm. So it becomes a conversation piece, for better or for worse, often worse in the case of children that do not want unwanted attention during school. So coming back to the main point, when you give birth to something new, to something intelligent, to something beautiful that deviates from the status quo, there is a tremendous amount of cult energy that is directed at reestablishing the norm, not because it cares about you or any particular person, but because it cares about there being a norm. And in crude levels of intelligence, it's always the law of mass. In high levels of intelligence, it's the law of intelligence. When you're leading and dealing with highly competent top people in the field, and you present clear, overwhelming data that a new approach that almost no one in the world is doing delivers vastly superior results to the old approach, the most competent and intelligent people in the room embrace the new technology with excitement. However, in low intelligence environments, the tension is much more of one between a pinball and a bowling ball. Now imagine this phenomena where the bowling ball is rolling through time and it's heading for a cliff. It doesn't know it because it's a bowling ball. We're talking about low intelligence. Now the pinball is trying to alert and head in the different direction. It's seen the issue and is going away from the cliff. However, it's a low intelligence environment, and the bowling ball and the pinball collide. Now, the law of mass is not the law of intelligence. The law of mass is the law of the bully. And the law of mass simply says that the majority will always win in a conflict, in a brute conflict with a minority. The bowling ball is going to knock the pinball flying, and the bowling ball and the pinball will proceed to the chasm going over the cliff. And maybe at the end, if there's some level of intelligence at the bottom when the bowling ball shatters in pieces, you will have an awareness, I wish we'd listened to the pinball. But it's not the way that a cult works. The cult establishes norms and then enforces those norms, often insanely, often hypocritically, often in direct opposition to the stated goal. We do it because we do it, and we do it because we did it, and we did it because that's the way things were done, and that's good enough for me, says the bowling ball, says the majority, says the cult. Now, cults die off, of course. 95% of all cults in human history are dead. They're bowling balls that went over a cliff, or that iterated. You know, where did Santa Claus come from? You know, did Jesus talk about the red and the white and the reindeer? And there were no reindeer in, you know, the desert, you know, where Jesus was born. So where did Santa Claus come from? Well, the Christians iterated some of the shamanic technologies of Siberia. The red and the white is the Amanita muscaria mushroom that the Siberian shaman and their tribes found sacred because it was a true way to connect with the endogenous DMT inside the brain, to have a transcendent experience of knowing one's oneness with everything. It was the most sacred thing that they had. And the reindeer love the psychedelic properties of the Amanita muscaria mushroom so much that they will sometimes charge up and drink the urine of the shaman pissing outside the tent after drinking a mushroom brew. So you have Santa Claus, the giver of gifts, the red and the white, and the reindeer, and the Christmas tree. And the Christian just say, okay, we'll take that, and we'll say, oh yes, you're not interested in our cult of a guy being nailed to a cross, but how about this? How about this? How about this? On Jesus' birthday, Santa Claus, your mushroom, you're this, and you know, and you just co-opted into the story. So cults do survive these tensions. If you can't beat them, join them. Just invent a mythology and forget where it came from. Because cults don't like examining themselves because it kind of defeats the point, doesn't it? If you're trying to create a cult-like dynamic of unquestioned authority just because, so that everyone will do things exactly the way that everyone does things and stay that way without questioning, so that you can get through the day without thinking too much, without expending energy on novel and intelligent ideas. Well, if you're trying to do that, you don't want to explain that, oh yes, we couldn't get the Greek myths out of this area, so we just had to, adopt this here and write it into the new edition of the Bible, and we couldn't get rid of these people, and it doesn't fit our narrative, so we just don't talk about it, and that's how we maintain that status quo. And here we are. We've got a wonderful status quo of absolute nonsense that would not hold together under a microscope of a 10-year-old. But it doesn't matter. You just slap the 10-year-old and say, because I said so. And pretty soon, he too is thinking algebra is an important subject and has stopped wondering why they're not teaching marriage psychology in high school, since his parents seem to be at each other's throats all the time. And so the cult has prevailed. Now, because of this headwind of cultural innovation, of intelligence, really, because based on the 10,000 cults in human history, the dead languages, the dead mythologies, every single one of which we think is nonsense, because that's the nature of cult thinking. The cult will tell you an absolute pile of rot, and then with a straight face, it'll turn around and look at the other cults that have plates in their mouth, or, they're mutilating the women's genitalia, not the men's genitalia. Oh, isn't that barbaric? We only, of course, cut off the foreskin of our boys. We would never, mutilate a girl's vagina. That's barbaric. Stay in this cult. We'll just cut off the tip of your penis and everything's wonderful. And don't ask questions. It's the way things are done. And so these cults are dead. 95% of the cults that anthropologists are aware of are dead. Why? Because they were stupid. Because they didn't do a good job of maximizing the well-being of the people in them. So they either died off and the cult died with them. But there is a very symbiotic and psychopathic relationship between the cult and its members, because many members willingly die for their cult, sometimes called their country, and many cults ask their people to die to preserve their identity. What is your identity? Well, it's the habit of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Well, why should we preserve it? Is it the best pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that we can imagine? Is it the best that has ever been? Is it, in the common cult parlance, divinely sanctioned by God on high? Of course, God only likes our cult and killed off the other 95%. But if you have a rational brain, you have to understand that 1,000 years from now, there's a 95% chance that most of what is thought, felt, said, done, and being, of the way we're interacting in our environment, will be dead and replaced with something else, hopefully more intelligent. Intelligence as defined by the efficiency with which energy, time, money, and natural resources is transformed into human well-being. So back to my point. There's an uneasy relationship with change. This is certainly pointed to in the Christian tradition. Jesus came and had some different ideas, and he was murdered to protect the status quo. So it's the same habit of any cult. So Jesus was murdered to protect the status quo of the day. Christians who have commandments not to kill will kill voraciously and violently throughout history, including the present day, to protect the new cult, because we don't want those foreigners around here. We don't want change. Good or bad is irrelevant. The cult's job is to maintain the status quo. Now, every intelligent person's greatest aspiration is to bring life to their cult, to speed up the rate of change, to speed up the rate of intelligence, to achieve more sustainable well-being per unit of energy than the status quo. And the cult wants to kill them because you cannot have a status quo if the chaos and change happens so quickly that nobody quite knows exactly what's going on. And once the status quo is lost, then you're back to the problem of your neighbor deciding randomly to drive on the other side of the road for this or that reason. Maybe it's more shady there. And so, who knows? They certainly didn't consult the consensus or you or the laws of the road. They just iterated spontaneously. So the cult puts out machine gun-like energy to shoot down all change and protect itself, not the people, itself. But by protecting itself, create a refuge of the known in opposition to the unknown. Now, this is also, one of the bases for the chauvinistic principle in the Star Wars series, to bring order to the galaxy, to strike down the rebellion, to have everything functioning, lock, step, and barrel. And so you have Leia and the tribes and the rebels and the outlaws and the animals. And then you have the imperialists that are trying to crush that dissent. And in any healthy relationship with any polarity, there is a respect for both sides. There is a respect for order. I mean, if you don't even respect the order of language when preaching revolution, you are completely ineffective. To be the most effective revolutionary imaginable, you have to use order. You have to use energy with more structure and efficiency and strategy than the cult that's trying to kill you, because you're different. Because you're different. And because every difference, every change requires the entire cult to wake up and divert attention to processing the new algorithm, the new code. And people don't want to wake up. They want to do what they've always done because it worked before, and they wanted to keep working. And it's with great irritation and anger and impatience. What? Women want to vote? I mean, this had to have major debates in the 1920s. All women and men are created equal. First, they want to free the slaves. Then women want to vote. Whatever next? Women being equal to men? Goodness gracious. And the change, we'll have to think about all these things. Oh, God, goodness, it'll be such a nightmare. Should we open the door? Should we not? Is it higher ranking to do this? Should women be president and have babies? What if a nuclear, we don't want to think about all this. It's too much to think about. So what do? You maintain the cult. You maintain the status quo. It will just stay exactly as it was before. So we persecute, we burn, we incinerate our visionaries, our artists, our truth tellers, our most competent people, because they threaten the status quo. They threaten the system that allows people to be comfortable in a repetitive pattern of norms that, however absurd, however schizophrenic, however pathologically insane they are repetitive. And that is the goal of the cult. Hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? I don't want to know how you are. Hello, how are you? I don't want to. Hello, how are you? I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm not fine, but I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm gonna wear a business suit in Africa because I'm civilized. I'm a member of my cult. So as ecological conditions change, I resist them in every way imaginable, demonstrating my cult-like thinking, demonstrating my loyalty to the cult, who will reward me by allowing me to continue my membership in the cult with all of the collaboration and support of all the other cult members who are the majority. Now, this is 10-to-1 leverage, sometimes 1,000-to-1 leverage, which means you put out a great idea, a novel thing, and the cult gets together and starts to grind it down until it disappears and the cult prevails. Hooray, we don't have to think about that new idea. We've killed it. It's beautiful. We don't have to listen to Jesus talk anymore. He's dead. Thank heavens that we can go back to doing things the way we were doing them before. So where does the energy come from to change under the barrage of cult weaponry that is gunning for a 10x life? Because it's different. You see, you can't have a 10x life doing exactly what everyone who doesn't have a 10x life is doing. If we could, everyone would be all for it. If the cult could generate 10 times better health, 10 times higher intelligence, 10 times more wealth, if the cult could generate a 10x life while changing absolutely nothing, there would be no resistance to 10x living and a 10x life. Because the cult is not resisting a 10x life, it's resisting change that is necessary to experience a 10x life. The cult is resisting change that is necessary to get 10 times better results out of the same volume of time, money, and natural resources. It's fighting change. Now, if you've ever been ganged up on by 1,000 people and tried to prevail when their main goal was just to squash you, it wasn't about rationality. Because there is and there isn't a rationality in a cult. The rationality is we do things because that's why we do things. And that's how we prevent chaos and change for our people. There's rationality in that. But there is no or very little rationality in most of the things that are being perpetuated because that's the way we do things. You can't make a solid case for spending $1 million to lock someone up, not just someone, but millions of your own people, and not spend $100 helping parents become more traumatically literate prior to severely traumatizing their child to such a point where they can't fit into the cult even if they want to. There's no logic for that. It is insane. Cults are always insane. They always have been. They always will be. That's not their goal is not sanity. Their goal is conformity. It's why the Wall by Pink Floyd is such a beautiful example of a band exploring the tension between the wall, between the cult, and the innocence, the truth, the beauty of the individual that is being slaughtered, mown down in a genocide of parental and cult abuse that is sanctioned as normal because everyone else is doing it. It's a horrific thing to watch. So where do you get energy? If you do something truly innovative in a cultural level, if it is intelligent, it is viewed as a threat. If it's not intelligent, if you're just some artist scribbling with your toes, for example, while dangling from a rope, or painting an all-yellow painting, and selling it for $20 million. I mean, it's not that much of a threat. Nicely capitalistic, that's the cult. Doing weird things because they're weird that don't have any particular meaning. Good, that's good. That won't change anything. Investing in art for money's sake. Good. That's in line with capitalist modality. So we're fine. But suggesting that we have a test for parents before they have children, well, that messes with the fundamentals of freedom. Well, what kind of freedom is so important to you? You've given up this freedom, that freedom, this. No, but this one has been the same for thousands of years. For thousands of years, incompetent parents have had the freedom to fuck and produce as many children they don't know how to raise as they are delusional enough to proceed with. And we just say nothing about it, even though anyone can look at them and say, oh gosh, that child is going to be messed up in that family. Everyone knows it. So it's not intelligent to intervene, to do something, to give that parent a test. No. That messes with the cult. So where do you get the energy to evolve as an individual and to participate in the evolution of the cult. Because as much as the cult wants to kill you, if you do not die, for whatever reason, and you have a small influence in the cult, you are increasing the likelihood that that cult will iterate rather than go totally extinct. Because a cult can go extinct either by killing all of its people who are too blind to deviate from the cult, or it can go extinct by iterating so that 500 years from in the future, you don't look anything like you were 500 years ago, because intelligent artists, thinkers, lovers, and innovators brought a little piece and a little piece, and slowly, 2% by 2%, the cult pivoted to be more intelligent, to be intelligent enough that it was not consumed by other cults that were vastly more intelligent, or other species or other planets that were more intelligent, because they didn't fight change quite so viciously as the majority of cults do. The majority of cults condemn their members to death by fighting so viciously against all change that they become the greatest enemy of their cult, of their people's survival. So in a normal equation, if you take an energy system and start depleting it, you take the energy of one person against 1,000 people, Gandhi against England. In a normal system, it becomes unprofitable through the hedonic lens of self-interest to pursue what is good for everyone, but which threatens the cult. And so Gandhi will back off. Well, if you're that worried about salt, you're going to beat and kill and do this and that and the other. If you're that upset about us becoming independent, we'll just lay down and be sheep and do exactly what you say and send endless taxes to Great Britain. However, Gandhi did persist in risking his life, etc. And the question is, where do you get the energy? If the cult is wearing you down and sucking the energy out of you, and you're bringing attention to it, where do you get the energy to keep going? Now, in a closed system, you don't, and the cult destroys you. And so when you do not have access to energy outside of your psychological, physical system, you crumble under the weight of your cult. You become tamed and subdued. You stop speaking up because children are seen and not heard in Victorian days, and enough slaps and humiliations and beatings and laughter while you're crying, and you too can become a scared sheep, resentful, but too frightened to feel that resentment and speak about it, because you are surrounded by giants and the bullies of a cult indoctrinated protocol of cruelty that maintains a status quo in which the head of the table is the only person with power over his subjects, his possessions, his family. No one's going to talk to his woman that way. He'll beat the shit out of her, but no one else is going to touch his possession. And how do you deal with that? Well, you get ground down. But this is where transcendence is so important if you're looking to lead, to innovate, to create a 10x culture. Because in meditation, You've got the intelligence of physics. You've got the intelligence of mathematics. You've got the intelligence of the universe. You've got the intelligence of nature. You've got all of life around you, seeking to breathe sanity into your cult, validating your supposition. And so by energizing your body, your heart and mind with the divine, with all that is, with science, with nature, with mathematics, with life, suddenly you go from being one against millions, with the millions trying to cut and grind you out, and the one trying to find and orchestrate the freedom to live a 10x life. Suddenly, you've got universes against one tiny cult, 95% of which have been and will be extinct. There's a 95% chance that every carefully defended norm of your cult today will lay in the ruins of barbaric history, with people scratching their heads that anyone would defend such nonsense. And yet today it's 1 against a million of people who will die to defend that nonsense. That's the power of the cult. It's the spell of the cult. And yet, in 500 years, 95% of the time, your cult will be extinct. And all of the people spouting it will be. What will not be extinct is physics, is mathematics, is transcendent experience, is the blessing of the multiverse on an evolutionary path towards higher and higher levels of intelligence that has so far taken an energy mass this big, created the multiverse in which the galaxy, the solar system, and the Earth reside, upon which billions of creatures on this planet alone have come out of that speck of nothing, following the mathematics of physics of the multiverse, not the cult. 95% of all cults are dead. This one will be too. But by that time, life, truth, beauty, mathematics will give rise to something more intelligent. It's just a matter of time. Meditating, grounding, feeling that, connecting with that core. We can find the true relationship, the true balance with something that's taking us forward, even when seemingly we are alone. Outside the cult blinders, all of life and all of physics is with us, setting the stage for something 10 times more intelligent than our own current cult.